I wanted to make a couple quick comments on the passing of Phil Spector, mainly because I've been talking a lot about the Beatles' Let It Be topics, and Phil Spector fits into this story a little bit, somewhat controversially. The wall of sound that Spector created in the early 60s was really a big deal. He was a pioneer in record production, and John Lennon had always said and thanked Phil Spector for filling in that gap between the time Elvis went to the Army and about 1962. And the wall of sound was a very big sound that was created because a lot of these vocal groups didn't have bands, and Phil Spector became the band. And a couple of the bands or the groups that he worked with were the Righteous Brothers, the Ronettes, and the Crystals. I don't have an album handy for the Crystals, but he ended up marrying Ronnie Bennett. She became Ronnie Spector. So the Ronettes' Be My Baby was their big hit, and Spector co-wrote some of these songs as well. Spector also wrote the biggest hit of the Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Loving Feeling. And it was for that record that the term wall of sound was coined by Andrew Loog Oldham of the Stones. So Spector was getting noticed everywhere. The Beatles respected him. The Beach Boys sound, Brian Wilson's production was based really, he was a disciple of Phil Spector. And Spector was just riding high at the time. The mid-60s came, and when folk rock hit, and Spector was based in Los Angeles, I think he wanted to start getting into some band production. He approached the Lovin' Spoonful, and they turned him down. He tried to work with the Modern Four Quartet, but that never got off the ground. And then he eventually hooked up with Ike and Tina Turner and was going to do his masterpiece, River Deep, Mountain High. And this has got to be the biggest flop of the entire decade because it just flopped horribly. It charted at number 88. That's as high as it got, with a bullet. It was a bigger hit in England, but because it bombed so badly in the States, he never quite recovered after that, and he was basically washed up until the Beatles threw him a bone and asked him to help out with the production of Let It Be. Now, Let It Be, as everybody knows, was a troubled project in its conception, on whether it's going to be a TV show or a movie or a film. They didn't even plan on it to be an album at first, but that's what it became and what's most remembered for. And by the time all the tapes were shipped to Spector, they were already over a year old. And I just want to go over some of the stuff that Spector did on this album because that's what's controversial. Basically, Spector's wall of sound, he didn't really utilize the wall of sound on this album, but he did a lot of lush orchestrations that essentially went against this get back idea of being a stripped back album. So let's look at those few songs that were really affected. The first one I want to talk about is I Me Mine, George's song. Now, that song was recorded, it was like about a minute and a half long, and Spector elongated that and added some very tasteful strings. And those strings, I think, gave the song a lot more drama. So I really give Spector an A on that song. Likewise, I'd give him an A on Let It Be. Let It Be, one of the Beatles' greatest songs, one of Paul McCartney's best vocals, gospel-y sounding type of song. The brass that was added to that I thought was perfect actually. I thought that was a tasteful addition to the song, and if I hear the stripped back version, I don't quite like it as much. The next song, Across the Universe, that was an older track that had it had some backwards guitar on it and some like a tambura drone in the background. Those got wiped in favor of more lush orchestration. And I think that's all right. I would give that about a B. It doesn't, I don't think it takes it to the heights that Let It Be went to, but I thought the strings on there worked. Finally, the last song that really got this full Spector treatment is Long and Winding Road. And this is the most controversial song because Paul McCartney apparently did not okay that. He did not okay for that to be embellished in that way with strings. And I think that Spector went over the top with this one. I think it's overblown. I think that the choir is especially bad. The strings are schmaltzy, yes, but the song is a little bit schmaltzy. So I give his work on this one a C-. I think that it still works. And I know a lot of people absolutely love this song. And I know people that actually call out the string arrangement as a part of the song they like. Had George Martin done the arrangement on that song, it would have sounded Martin had a style that he adopted for the Beatles string arrangements that was more based on Vivaldi. This is a little more Boston Pops, I guess you'd call it, or it's more commercial. You know, would it have hit #1 without those strings and all that lush recording? I don't know. The stripped down version from Let It Be Naked, that doesn't sound like a #1 song to me. But what Spector did, I think that might have pushed it higher than it would have gone otherwise. So overall, I think Spector really gets a bad rap for this album. And in the Beatles lexicon, or in the Beatles history, there are certain figures that get beat up a lot, and Spector's one of them. And I really think that this album sounds really good. When I was a kid and heard this when I was like about 6 years old or 7, it sounded great then, and to me it sounds great now. And part of the thing that makes it sound so great are the linked tracks with the dialogue. And I think that really makes this sound cohesive. And mind you, Spector made this record without the aid of having Don't Let Me Down added to this album. And it's a shame that that wasn't added to this, because that really would elevate this album higher. And I guess the reason, I'm not quite sure why they didn't put it on there. You know, they somewhat had a practice of not putting singles on the albums, but that was going away by this time. Obviously by Abbey Road, that was completely forgotten. And it's a shame that that wasn't added to this, because I think this album would be a lot better with it on. Still wouldn't be the Beatles' best album, but certainly not their worst. So Spector was not done with the Beatles. Obviously, Paul McCartney was not going to use them again, but John Lennon and George Harrison did. And I thought Spector did a pretty fine job on Lennon's first 2 solo albums. Lennon preferred the stripped back sound anyway, and I think he did a fine job on those 2 albums. I thought the single Instant Karma was a little bit overblown. That's where Spector, it's too echoey. I thought that was a little bit too much. But aside from that, I thought his production on Lennon's stuff was pretty good. I don't feel the same way about his production on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. Now, I think Harrison clearly wanted to go in a more heavy produced direction. And he got it. And the thing I don't like about it is the fact that Phil Spector, his strength was building a band sound when there was no band. But in this case, Harrison had some great players with him. He had Gary Wright, Eric Clapton, Billy Preston, Bobby Keys, Ringo, Alan White, a bunch of others. And all that playing is just lost in a mess of mush and heavy echo. And I really think that's just too bad. I think to do an album focused on those players, a little softer feeling, I think would have been much better. The songs that suffer the most are the louder songs, like Wah Wah, Isn't It a Pity, Let It Down, Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, Awaiting on You All, and Art of Dying. I think those suffer the most from this heavy production. However, the more subdued songs like Run of the Mill, Beware of Darkness, which is my favorite track on the album, I'd Have You Anytime, My Sweet Lord sounds great, and Apple Scruffs, I think those all sound fine. So, I mean, it's a mixed affair. So after this work with the ex-Beatles here, his work became less and less vital with some minor exceptions. He did some production with Leonard Cohen and the Ramones. After that, you know, he was known more for his eccentricities. You know, everybody knows about how he kept Ronnie Spector prisoner for all those years. And of course, there was that murder, you know, so he has quite a diverse resume. But all that aside, he was, you know, he's a complicated figure, an easy person to hate. And he still left behind a very solid body of work before he kind of went off the deep end. But I don't know. I think the Let It Be stuff is where he gets still the most talked about. And I guess I like it. But some people, it seems like they either love it or hate it. So what do you think? Good or bad? Or in between? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Put your comments below. I'd love to hear it. Well, that's it for my spotlight on Phil Spector, dead at 81. Check back again, because I'll be doing some more videos on the Beatles Get Back, Let It Be sessions, and some of those narratives go along with them. So that'll be coming up soon here on Pop Goes the 60s.
He hit me, and it felt like a kiss.